C'est parti. Zut.
Good evening. I'm happy to be with you. We're gonna speak today about le gin de Christian Drouin. We've seen in the last sessions many information about CALVADOS, the history of the company. Le gin is actually probably the last big move that we've done in the company. It happened about 5 years ago, and this idea actually came to me because we started to sell more and more CALVADOS to the bars, to cocktail bars. You know, I'm a very curious person. I love playing with flavors. My background is an enologist, so it has always been a passion for me to taste and compare the flavors and play with them. And so this is what attracted me in the gin category. It was the fact that there's a lot of options when creating a gin, and a lot of possibilities on how to play with flavors. So, you know, I was meeting more and more bartenders very often. Some bartenders were very happy to present me a new gin, a new recipe, and I was tasting. And then I started to wonder, would it be possible to create a good gin made with apples? And it was a challenge at first. You know, I just started to think about it. I thought, could we create a recipe around our fruit in Normandy, the cider apples? And it was very interesting to work on that. You know, the first step was actually when I was in Belgium, and I was going to a wine shop in Belgium, and they were selling a small box like this with different botanicals for making your gin at home. And I thought, okay, well, that's funny. I'll bring that home and I will try. And the first thing I did is I took all these botanicals and I macerated them in a blanche, in eau de vie de cidre. The purpose was not, of course, to make a gin that way, but it was to check which botanicals we would react in the best way with the flavors of the apples. And I experimented many different botanicals, and then we came to a selection of 8 different botanicals at the end. These botanicals are vanilla, cinnamon, ginger, almond. So these 4 botanicals were really actually selected to match with the apple flavor. It's actually even botanicals that one can find in a good old CALVADOS. Almond, cinnamon, that's, you know, very obvious in a lot of a very obvious aroma in a lot of CALVADOS. And then I was when I worked with these 4 botanicals at first, we had a very interesting gin, very well integrated, but it was a bit heavy, and I thought we need to reinforce the gin signature, and I've added cardamom for that, because I think cardamom really goes in the direction of the juniper and is really one of the strong signature of a gin. And then I wanted to bring also some lighter flavors to it, and I used rose and lemon. And then when I was experimenting on how to create this gin, one of the challenge I had was that you know, I realized that if I put all the botanicals together and if I macerate all the botanicals together, it's going to be very difficult to achieve the best concentration. And also I wondered, is that logical to macerate vanilla in the same way as juniper or almond? And I realized it was not, and it was actually very important to be able to macerate separately each botanical to get the best from each flavor. And that's actually how le gin is made nowadays. Every botanical is macerated separately. We make a distillate of juniper, we make a distillate of vanilla, we make a distillate of almond, etc., etc. So we first create 9 distillates. One of these distillates is made with more than 35 different varieties of cider apples, and that's how we bring all the apple flavors to the blend. And the base we use is a natural alcohol. It's a grain alcohol, because that's a definition of a gin. We have to start with a natural alcohol, an alcohol that has no flavors. You know, it could have been an option, of course, to start with a base of cider, distill a cider into vodka to get a natural alcohol from apple. But doing that, I was actually no interest, because a vodka is a vodka, and there would have been no flavors of the apples in the final result. So this is why we decided to work in a different way and to incorporate a special distillate of apples, of ciders in the recipe. Because of that very specific approach, I think we have created a gin that is quite different from many others. It is a very intense gin, very concentrated, very long lasting. We have a very nice smooth and round structure to it because of these distillations process, because we do so many distillations. Every botanical is worked in a different way. You know, some of the botanicals are macerated several weeks, some others just a couple of days or even one night. And for most of the botanicals, we will macerate them in an alcohol at about 30%, and we redistill these botanicals after up to 70%, and then we make the blend and reduce the gin slowly to 42%, which we found was the good balance for this recipe. So what I'm gonna make quickly a gin and tonic. Just give me 10 seconds, I'll be back with some ice. Ice has to be cold. So if any of you has a question, please do not hesitate to ask. I'm always happy to answer. So to make a good gin and tonic, you need a big glass and you need a lot of ice. I'm sorry if there are bartenders watching. I'm sure I'm not doing things in the best way. But still, we'll make a good gin and tonic. So when using the gin, because it's very aromatic, I actually don't advise to put too much of it. You know, very often gin and tonic is made with 1/3 of gin, 2/3 of tonic. Some people even go higher for the proportion of gin. I advise, you know, to use the gin in a proportion of maybe 1/4 or a little more than 1/4, but probably not 1/3, because it's so intense and aromatic compared to many other gin. Then what is important as well is actually to find a good tonic. The gin has already naturally some bitterness in the recipe. So I really advise to use a tonic which is not too bitter. The Mediterranean from Fever Tree, I think, is a perfect match with Le Gin, because it's light, it's not too bitter, it's not very aromatic, it's not very intense. So it really helps to show the flavors, the complexity of Le Gin, but it's not overtaking Le Gin, and it's not too bitter. And then the secret is actually to drink it very cold. Good gin tonic is always cold. I like to work with different garnish, but that's really seasonal. That's an elderflower, and well, that's only a few weeks in the year, but now is the good time to use elderflower as a garnish. It works well. If it's not May and you don't find elderflower, you can use a small bowl of apple. And in that case, I would advise you to actually macerate this bowl of apple in a bit of CALVADOS first, and then use that as a garnish in the gin and tonic. A slide of lemon also does a very good job with the gin, I think. And well, I mean, the fun is also to experiment and find the garnish you really like. So cheers. It's nice and refreshing, perfect for that hot day. It's not yet summer, but we really feel like a summer day today in Normandy. We had a fantastic spring actually, and we continue to have a perfect weather. It's good because we have to spend a lot of time in Normandy at the moment, impossible to travel. So I am going to tell you a little bit now about this gin. This is Le Gin Calvados cask finish. It's actually the same recipe as Le Gin, a little bit reinforced with a bit more juniper in this recipe, but nearly the same. And it was aged in Calvados cask. We took cask of Calvados which are 225 liters, and they have been used during 10 years for aging Calvados of 5-6 years. They were actually casks that we use for our VSOP Calvados. And then we've used this cask and refilled them with Le Gin. The first bottling we did of Le Gin in Calvados cask was aged a bit more than 6 months in the cask. Nowadays the bottling we do are more about 1 year of aging or a little more. It's also very interesting because the cask brings more apple flavor. It reinforces the flavors of the apple. It brings more spices as well, and complexity. So it's also very interesting gin. The gin Calvados cask for me is really a sipping gin. You can have it as a sour, mix it with some lemon juice eventually, but I really think it's a gin that is gorgeous to drink neat. You know, when I created actually the Le Gin, and you know, we're a family business here, and I still work with my father, who is a very active and passionate person. And well, when 6 years or 7 years ago, I started to tell him that I was planning to work on a gin. At first, he was pretty easy on the project, say, yeah, okay, why not? You can work on it. But like when we came 2 or 3 months before putting the product on the market, when he realized that things were getting ready and it would happen, it was another stress, because you know, it was something very different from what we have always done than Calvados. And one of the discussion we had was, I mean, Christian Drouin can make a gin considering that it's a gin that you can appreciate neat. It has to be a tasting gin, and we wanted really to create a recipe that had a strong personality, which was an artisanal product with a real process of distillations, blending, and that's how we made it something that looks like what we are: artisanal producers and people who like complexity in our spirits. Later on, about 2 years ago, I thought it could be interesting to work on a different recipe, and that's how Carmina came. I wanted to work with red fruits, and so in Carmina the dominant flavors here are raspberry and blackcurrant. We kept the same process of production. Every botanical is macerated separately. We also use more than 30 different kind of apples in this recipe. So the same process as the gin, but very different botanicals. And so here we have raspberry, we have blackcurrant, we also have lemon and orange, we have vanilla, and we have elderflower. It's a more straightforward gin, I think, than the gin. Carmina is very fruity, a bit lighter, more straightforward. It's really excellent as a gin and tonic. My advice for Carmina is to use a raspberry as a garnish. It really give a perfect result. And again, what is needed here: for tonic as a light tonic, not too bitter, not too sweet, a tonic that helps the flavors to open and to develop. Maybe a few ideas on how to use the gin out of the traditional gin and tonic. I told you earlier about a sour. There is a recipe of cocktail which I like a lot, which is bee's knees. It's a sour which you make with honey. So you actually use le gin, lemon juice and honey together. It's a very simple recipe and it's really good. You can also use maple syrup instead of honey, and you get very good result that way. There's an old recipe which is cool, I think, for us, which is angel face. That was the favorite cocktail of Al Capone. And angel face is made of 1/3 of Calvados, 1/3 of gin, and 1/3 of apricot liqueur. It's a very powerful cocktail, very intense, but really good and perfect to do with le gin. You've got the French 75, which is made of gin and champagne, which is a recipe I like as well. So there are actually plenty of great options to do with le gin. If there's no question, I think I will enjoy this last minutes to wish everyone a good evening. Enjoy the rest of the day. I hope everybody has a great sun like we do here, and so that you can enjoy tonight a good gin and tonic. Cheers.